model is to look at how we can utilize and manage the Mississippi River and its resources, not just for sediment diversions that will be used to combat land loss, but also to look at the impacts on navigation of these various strategies. Thirdly, look at maybe other flood control measures. The new Mississippi River physical model is not just going to cover more of the river. Instead of covering just about the lower 70 miles of the river, the new model is going to cover from the Sunshine Bridge near Donaldsonville down to the Gulf of Mexico. Every year in the Mississippi River, things are slightly different. The flow rates might be different, the sediment coming down the river might be different. And in a laboratory, we're able to perform experiments that are very controlled, and we can collect data that we can directly compare to each other. So we're very excited about the construction of the LSU Center for River Studies, funded by the State Coastal Protection Restoration Authority, and the construction being headed up by the Division of Administration. Those efforts are really going to improve the quality and the educational experience.
Is under threat due to erosion that's gotten so bad that salt water from the nearby Gulf of Mexico has killed most of the trees. Clay Boudreau has watched the land slowly disappear.
There was no open bodies of water like you see now until you got to Barataria Bay. But our estuary was either marsh or it was a defined bayou.
Louisiana has lost 5,000 square kilometers of coastline since the 1930s. Now, scientists at Louisiana State University's Center for River Studies have created a huge river model to help them study how sediment from the Mississippi can be used to fight coastal erosion.
Not only can we model the flows and the river stages or the water levels in the Mississippi River, we can also model or simulate the transport or the movement of the Mississippi River sand down the river. And we can do all of that in roughly 1 hour to replicate 1 year on the river.
The model is made of high-density foam panels. Tiny particles of plastic injected into the water mimic the sediment coursing through the Mississippi. Rising seas are replicated by raising the water level. Visitors can feel the moisture from the roughly 22,000 liters of water floating on the model that replicate the river, Gulf of Mexico, and the lakes and bayous along the coast. The model is attracting worldwide attention.
We've had folks from China, we've had folks from Bangladesh who have a major river flooding problem in their nation. They're looking at ways to living and working with the river.
There are hopes that a diversion project will help restore Lake Hermitage and the surrounding estuaries.
In 1942, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers started building what is the greatest model ever made. So in 1927, America suffered what Herbert Hoover called the greatest peacetime calamity in the country's history, Great Mississippi Flood. It flooded 7 states, 500,000 people were displaced, and it cost the country 1/3 of their entire federal budget at the time. But mainly it was just terrible. And so the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers did what they do. Up and down the Mississippi, they built levees. Everyone was like, cool, no more flooding, we tamed nature. And then in 1937, it flooded again. Because every time they built a levee somewhere, that area wouldn't flood, but like a town just a few miles down would be destroyed. They didn't understand how the river really worked. Corporal Eugene Raybould, this guy had a genius idea. He was like, why don't we model it? And what this meant was literally, why don't we build a gigantic model of it? So the notion was, let's make a scale model, a tiny version of the entire Mississippi River basin. The scale of this model is amazing. It meant building a model of 40% of the entire US, 8 miles of tiny streams. It's so big, you can't see it except from a plane or a helicopter, because it's spread out over 200 acres. The whole thing was a hydraulic model, so they could just pull a lever and run through an entire flood, and it let them put up little levees and figure out, okay, if we put a levee here, what happens down the river? They used it to stop a flood in Omaha and save $65 million. At the time, it was also a wonder. People came to visit it. They came to stride like giants across the landscape. The Army Corps of Engineers went to the trouble of building little buildings and making sure all the towns had names, and so it was kind of this incredible experience, and families would come to stride across the land. You could walk from the South to the Midwest in 5 minutes. 6 years after they finished it, they were done. The last test using the Mississippi River model was run. they didn't need it anymore. They left it. They just walked away, basically. And then they gave it to the city of Jackson, Mississippi, and they didn't know what to do with it. They didn't have any money. So they've literally just left it rotting in the middle of the park where it is today. The Army Corps of Engineers, set out to build this model, but they also made this kind of beautiful sculpture. So today, the